Hello grade 11, this is the second video of topic 4 about movement analysis. Yesterday we talked about the structure of a nerve and a motor neuron and a reflex arc. Today we're going to go into a little bit of detail about how a nerve impulse is propagated or how it travels along a neuron. If you do a bit of research about this, you will find a lot more detail, okay? So the detail I'm giving in this presentation is enough for sports science. If you go and do some research or you watch this particular animation, you will find a lot more detail about particular ions that are diffusing from one place to another. We don't need to know exactly that much detail. Okay, so the question we're trying to answer is, how does an impulse pass along a neuron? How does it get from one place to another? Okay, so when it is resting, a nerve cell has a negative charge. So this diagram here is just showing the inside of a cell, okay, with the cell membrane, and then this is outside of the cell. Inside the cell has a negative charge and outside the cell has a positive charge. Okay, this is compared to its surroundings, so it's negative compared to the outside of the cell. This is called the resting membrane potential. Okay, so when the nerve is at rest, inside negative, outside positive. Okay, we say that it is polarized at this point. Okay, so the neuron is polarized. So what happens when an impulse actually travels down? Well, as you can see from the image there, this inside section that was polarized, it was negative. Okay, if we see where this action potential or this impulse is traveling, all right, the inside of the cell has become positive. Okay, so in order for an impulse to travel along the neuron, the resting membrane potential must be changed and become depolarized. You can see over here that what's happening is that sodium ions are diffusing into the cell, but again, that's a little bit more detailed than we need to know. All you need to know is that ions are diffusing across the cell membrane, and because ions are charged particles, which I know you remember from grade 10, when they take the charge with them, they're changing the potential or they're changing the charge of the neuron. So what happens, it's a bit like a wave when this is traveling along in this direction, okay? What's happening is the positives are coming inside one at a time, all the way down the axon until you get to the end of the axon. Okay, so it's like a wave of depolarization is what it's called, that goes all the way along a nerve. And what happens when it gets to the end? Well, we know the structure of the motor neuron anyway. Okay, and then we have something called a motor unit. The motor unit is this motor neuron, all of its branches and its dendrites down here, okay? And then that particular neuron is attached to a bundle of muscle fibers. So there's one muscle fiber there, there's another muscle fiber, there's another muscle fiber. All right, so there's quite a lot of muscle fibers together that one motor neuron will have an impact on. And an impulse will travel along this motor neuron, it will go to these presynaptic knobs, and it will make all of these muscle fibers contract. They will all shorten. Okay? So a motor unit is described as a single motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates. To innervate means that it attaches a nerve to it. All right, so there's nerves attached to it as well. So here you've got the nerve, here are the end plates of the nerve fiber, and it's attached to the muscle fibers as well. Okay, I just wanted to show you quite a cool animation. Let's go back a second. Between these end plates, okay, and the muscle fiber, there is a space called a synapse. All right, and synapses are how particular impulses are conveyed from one thing to another. So when you looked at the reflex arc in between the sensory neuron and the relay neuron, there would be a synapse. In between the relay neuron and the motor neuron, there would be a synapse. Okay, and a synapse exists between each of these end plates and the muscle fiber. Okay, the electrical impulse can't travel across that synapse, so there needs to be another mechanism. And this video, that's quite short but quite cool, just shows an animation of what might happen at the synapse, okay? So here you've got the end of one neuron, and in this case it's going to another neuron, but let's just watch this and see what happens.
A chemical synapse is a special junction between two neurons that allows them to communicate without being physically connected. A synapse has several structures. The presynaptic neuron ends in a small bulb called the presynaptic terminal. The postsynaptic terminal membrane is directly adjacent, separated by a small space called the synaptic cleft. An action potential causes voltage-gated calcium ion channels to open in the presynaptic terminal. The influx of calcium ions prompts synaptic vesicles to release neurotransmitters via exocytosis. This neuron is releasing acetylcholine. The neurotransmitter quickly diffuses across the synaptic cleft. Two acetylcholine molecules bind with one ligand-gated sodium channel at the postsynaptic membrane, opening the channel. When enough sodium ion channels open, the postsynaptic cell depolarizes and the action potential continues along the neuron.
Okay, again, a little bit more detail than we need, but what you should take away from that is that to get across the synapse, a neurotransmitter is released. Okay, so neurotransmitters go from the terminal end plate, okay, all the way across to the muscle fiber. Okay, that happens at a place called the neuromuscular junction, and I'd like you to pause this video and make a copy of this diagram in your books, please. It's one that I just took from Wikipedia. Okay, so you have, it's more of a cartoon style, but you have a neuron here, okay, in the end plate of the neuron, and then this is part of the muscle fiber, okay? So you've got the presynaptic terminal. Okay, so presynaptic meaning before the synapse. The sarcolemma is just a little bit of a membrane that's on the muscle fiber. And then you have a synaptic vesicle. Okay, that vesicle contains the neurotransmitter, and the neurotransmitter is a chemical that goes across the synapse to take the impulse from one place to another. Okay, so what will happen is these vesicles will fuse with the membrane, they release their content, so they release the neurotransmitter into the synapse here, and then it binds with one of these receptors. So these are nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. Yes, the word nicotine is to do with nicotine. So people who smoke or take in any kind of drug that has nicotine in, okay, the nicotine in your bloodstream can get to these receptors and it can stimulate those receptors without an impulse coming down here. Okay, so the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor is here, so the neurotransmitter will bind to it, and then the impulse will continue into the muscle fiber. Okay, a little bit about motor units. So when an impulse reaches a neuromuscular junction, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine is released. You need to know the name of this. Sometimes scientists shorten it when we're writing it to ACH. Okay, it filters across the synaptic cleft. You could also say diffuses if you want a slightly more technical word there. This causes depolarization of the motor end plate and puts the sliding filament theory of muscular contraction into practice. And we're going to do a lot of work about this next week. Okay? There's an all or none law which applies to the contraction of the fibers within a motor unit. When a motor unit activates, all of the fibers within the unit contract, and at full force, there's no strong or weak contraction. So you know from your own experience that you could contract your biceps muscle in a kind of half-hearted way, or you could do it fully contracted and really show those hench muscles off that you all think you have. That isn't about there being a particular size of impulse along one neuron. It's just about how many neurons are stimulated. Okay, so the strength of the resultant whole muscular contraction depends upon the number of motor units that have been stimulated. So the more motor units stimulated or recruited, the harder the contraction is going to be. All right, the more forceful the contraction is going to be. Okay, I'll leave it there. What you should have in your books is a diagram of the neuromuscular junction. Okay, notes about the synapse, definitely the key terminology, and you can pause the video and write these notes down, or you can find them in the presentation on our website. Okay, thank you.